Thanks everyone. There's a bottle of champagne down here, so I was hoping that was mine, but it's not. So today I'm going to talk through employee resilience, really from an organisational perspective. We have conducted a report which is a follow-on from a report that we first did in 2015. And the whole thinking around that was, we've seen this resurgence in people's willingness to discuss and talk about and deal with mental health issues. And a lot of that focuses on the individual. What really we wanted to do as an organisation is to think about that from an organisational perspective. And I think we've heard a lot today already from the keynote speakers about the role of culture. So the report touches on that. And in fact, our next piece of thought leadership will be a report on culture in the organisation. So I guess in terms of the context, again, this came through in one of the earlier speakers in terms of the economy and the living environment that we're all working in. There's so much change around now. There's so much uncertainty, and all of these kind of circumstances coming together to create stressful environments for people, not just as employees, but for us as employers in terms of the decisions that we need to make. Significantly, obviously, for UK employers, there's lots and lots of uncertainty right now because of the biggest sort of political and economic, we sort of made the decision, but we haven't really, in terms of the B word, that's the first time I've heard that actually today, which has been quite nice. But we literally are just in the process of doing a survey of SME businesses in the UK, and a strong increase in the number of those businesses saying that Brexit uncertainty is stopping them from making decisions. So this is all going on, and there's obviously this huge sort of change in terms of organisations' ability to look at data and examine data. And that's changing things in new ways in terms of the kinds of jobs that creates, the opportunities, but also the threats. Those of us that grew up in a non-digital economy, I can remember fax machines in my first job in advertising. Those things just don't exist anymore. And what does that mean in terms of the traditional skills that people have that may not now be needed, the more emotional skills that we need as leaders in terms of managers, and helping people work through and live through that uncertainty that they all face. And I think the key thing really around innovation is, and again linking to what we've heard earlier, is around what is the purpose of that innovation. I think it's a massive buzzword. A lot of people talk about disruption and innovation, but really what is the purpose of that? It should be solving society's problems or making a difference for our customers or whatever it is that your organisations exist to do. So that's all happening. We're trying to do the right thing, but we know that there's a significant cost around mental health. So we're all really familiar with the Stevenson Pharma report. Big numbers, really hard to identify with those numbers as individuals and even as employers. But the people here, I've got a statistic around 2.3 million saying that mental health problems affect their work. There'll be loads of other statistics around there. There are lots of statistics talking about this stuff. It doesn't really matter whether they're right or wrong. I think the important thing is that they are big numbers. And the reality is that the situation is probably worse than that. You'll have stoic people in your organisations that won't want to admit to themselves, let alone in a survey, anonymous or not, or a conversation with their manager, that they're struggling with mental health at any one time. And it's a changing thing. There's so many social pressures on people. We were talking about the sort of advent of the sort of social media pressures that puts on people. And you think about the younger generation coming through and how important that is to them to feel connected to their friends. But nobody's life is really like that. We're not going on these amazing holidays all the time and, doing fantastic things. But that's the pressure that people are under. And they can't really get away from that pressure when they come to work anymore. So we know that employers have got a really significant role to play. And also, do our organisations create stress? To what we were saying earlier in terms of remote working, does that sort of reduce stress? Does it make people feel worse? It's so multifaceted, and I think we all spend a lot of hours each day in the office or working from home, just working in general. So what role do we play in either helping or hindering individuals in terms of their own mental health, and how do they show up in terms of the workplace? So some quite depressing data in here. Only 1 in 5 employees in the survey that we did said that they didn't find their job stressful. So, pretty scary. 57% rather saying that their job stress has worsened in the last 12 months. So, again, more rather than less. And then again, back to that millennials piece, 50% of them saying that their job is stressful. So again, what did we hear earlier in the keynote speech? How are we creating purpose for them as employees? And you know, the challenge of managing millennials and bringing them what they need is very different to sort of those of us that have been around a bit longer in terms of, you know, our commitment to work and sort of putting on a brave face. I think millennials are less prepared to put up with that. They expect more of their employers in terms of what they get back from that. So really, really important that we all think about that from a demographic perspective. And again, if you think about sort of recruitment, retention, if people are not going to stay in their job, we were in a session earlier, my colleagues and I, we were talking about sort of recruitment and retention. It's a really expensive strategy to recruit somebody and then 18 months later, because, you know, the things aren't in place that they're looking for, they may not be with your organisation for very long, and then you've got to the turnover, you've got to deal with the issues. And if you have high turnover, you know, it goes without saying that the culture is not really sustainable. The turnover is probably almost a symptom of a poor culture, but how do you actually break that kind of downward spiral if people are sort of coming and leaving and coming and leaving because the culture isn't right for them? So we looked a bit further. We sort of like to delve into this data as much as we can. And what was it that employees were saying was causing them stress? Well, surprise, surprise, over half said, we just don't have enough people to do the job. And I think one of the most demotivating things as an employee is where managers say to their teams, look, we just have to do more with less. I think they are the three most negative things that you can say to employees. It's a horrible phrase, and none of us should say that when we go back to our jobs, to our colleagues or to the people that work for us. But linked to that, 52% of them said even the colleagues that are there are not performing. And I think as a society, especially in the UK, we're a bit sort of passive-aggressive in dealing with conflict. A lot of the time there's kind of hidden sort of conflict between employees. They might think, oh, well, you know, he's not pulling his weight. He's gone out for sort of 4 cigarette breaks today, and I've been at my desk since 7 o'clock this morning. All of that sort of festers in employees' minds and creates that feeling of stress. And if they don't feel that they can talk to anyone about it, add to that the fact that they're probably managing financial stress as well, which is a big topic coming through in a lot of these sessions today, then, you know, what does that mean? Our productivity is not going to be there. The service to customers is not going to be there. How sustainable are our organisations if this is what our employees are kind of putting up with every day? This is a bit of a misleading sort of slide, graphic rather, in terms of the scale, because I stupidly sort of, I'm not very good at Excel, started it at 35 and then finished it at 40, but you can see there is a slight improvement in terms of pressure from line managers, which is really good. And I think what we're seeing is the role of the line manager is, in my view, probably one of the single most important things that organisations need to look at, but unfortunately it's overlooked a lot of the time. So I said I've talked about this presentation the other week. I'd just seen Bohemian Rhapsody when I put this slide together, as you can tell from the title. But I just really wanted to use that as an opportunity to say, you know, what is the difference? We're saying that we're doing all these things. So many employers have EAPs in place now, which is fantastic. But really, what is happening in and amongst our employee populations? 65% of them are saying that they work extra hours on top of contracted hours. 25% are saying it's a challenge fitting family commitments around work, and it's a source of stress. So thinking about myself as an example, my mother-in-law broke her hip last Thursday. Husband had to come home from work. I was at home. We're now dealing with that. She's going to be released from hospital today. She doesn't have a partner. I mean, you know, it's just there, caring at this end, caring at that end. And how can we do that? Things like flexible working can be really, really useful, but we need to build trust in the organisation, which I'll come to in a minute. And then the really distressing one, we don't even get any time to turn off anymore. 25% of people saying that they're working on a weekend. And things like mobile phones, I just think are the sort of, you know, devil incarnate when it comes to being able to relax, because you can just see that thing there, think, oh, I just wonder if I'll just. It's kind of, again, a really bad thing when we say that to ourselves. I'll just check my emails, and before you know it, you're half an hour in, you've read something that's created stress from a colleague, you're not able to do anything about it, even worse, because it is the weekend. So, you know, this is not great. 64% of employers saying they're offering help, but are employees actually doing anything about that? Well, no, the evidence is telling us not. 44% of employees don't want to talk about it. I was talking to my parents about my sister last night. She's sort of voluntarily moved into a secondment role. She's finding it really, really difficult to do this job. because of the emotional dimensions. It's a claims management role, but she doesn't want to say anything to her manager because she thinks it's going to make her look weak and like she can't cope. So, you know, people think I'm not committed to my job if I'm admitting to these challenges, and also thinking that it's going to harm their career. So Lloyds were here earlier, and I think their CEO was amazing in what he did. If more people could do that at the high level, to actually say it's okay to talk about these things, then it becomes okay for everybody else, and that leadership culture is so, so important. And again, not judging people for having the brave sort of, you know, coming into work, asking for a meeting and talking to you about these problems. And that doesn't mean to say you need to solve all their problems for them. That's as bad in itself because you create a dependency culture. But in enabling people to come to work and talk about those challenges, I think we can do such a lot to help people with those pressures that they're under. And again, we've seen this in other presentations, huge divergence between what employees think. They're saying, no, I can't discuss it with my manager. And managers or employees are saying, yeah, they can discuss it with us. Well, clearly, you know, fact, fiction, those perceptions are perceptions, but for employees, those perceptions are very real. And do we really want people not sort of saying these things because they're worried that they're not going to progress in the organisation? I just think that's really sad. So the good thing is, and we're all in employers ourselves, our company's doing the same thing, mental health awareness, things like financial education programs, flexible working, which we've just been talking about. The one that I think ought to be at the top is training for managers, because you could have all those things in place, but given what we've just talked about in terms of employees' perceptions, you know, how they're feeling, if they are not having those conversations with their managers, then all those things might as well not be there. We know that take-up rates of employee assistance programs could be a lot higher because people don't trust them. It's kind of weird, but people don't think that they're anonymous even though they are. And then even 45% of employers said that their culture created stress. So that's really interesting, and it's not on the slide, but we asked employees, do you have a good culture? Only 18% of employees said that their business was kind of doing the right thing to create the right culture in the organisation. So yeah, I think those things are fantastic, but what is the culture that goes around those tactics, if you like, that are there in the organisation in terms of making a difference and supporting line managers? I think I heard a few years ago it's kind of one of the biggest areas that after the recession that businesses stopped spending money on training and support for line management. You know, I'm a line manager, I need training all the time. We could always be learning new things, and we should be thinking about that because our roles are so critical in the organisations that we're in. So we've put together, the reports are available on our stand. If you want to take one away, we'll be able to post them to our website soon. Not there yet, because this is kind of a preview session for you guys today. These things are really simple, and I think it's about three things. It's about building trust, recognising the role of line managers. I've talked about that a bit already. And the third one, and with me and my communications background, as we were just saying, I think the communication piece is absolutely key, but all of those things have to happen together for this to have an impact on organisation resilience. So, you know, build trust amongst peers. If people feel that they can have those conversations, then, you know, they're going to start to trust each other, but that does require commitment. You've got to start to think about what is the impact on employee engagement, what is the impact on retention and succession planning, and ultimately having that purpose and the authenticity. So Patagonia, I feel like I need to sort of leave today and go and apply for a job with them because they sound an amazing place to work. So, you know, natural working styles, bringing your whole self to work, we talk about all this stuff, but how effective are we in terms of doing these things? And individual working styles is really simple but so important. If you've got introverts and extroverts in the same organisation, don't make them work the same way. I'm an introvert. I'll be exhausted when I go home tonight from talking to people. Doesn't mean I don't want to, but it's a different thing for me and I need that recovery time. So think about how your officers can help or hinder that. Recognise that management can be a lonely job. Who can you talk to as a manager if you can't talk to your own manager, as we've heard? And the pressures that they're under are really significant. Budgets, pressures, all the things that you have to do every month, managing the risk, managing the budgets. It's, you know, it takes a lot of time, less time with your people. So when you are with your people, how can you find, you know, make those conversations really productive? One-to-ones don't always have to be about what's on your to-do list. I have 2 different one-to-ones with my team. One talks about their personal development and how they're feeling, and the other one we talk about the work list, and it separates the 2. And recognise those strong managers and reward those really good behaviours. And hopefully that will create a cohort of managers that are being respected and looked up to. And then finally, we've heard this already today, it's about purpose. It's about transparency of leadership, being honest about leadership challenges with your employees. Don't make everything sound great, and checking that employees understand all this. Communicate, communicate, communicate. It is not about having leaflets in the canteen that you can pick up and that talk about mental health. It's not enough. You need to understand that you're communicating to drive a behaviour change or encourage somebody to make a decision or make a connection with their manager, whatever that might be. So that's kind of in sum all I had to talk about today. Lots more information in the report. I hope you found that useful. I think we're just about out of time. Whether or not we've got time for a question, I'll look at our moderator.
Joe, thank you very much indeed.